So she's asking that if we deny qualia, have we denied having a private first point of view entirely? So she thinks that the concept of having qualia catalyst to have a reflect on our being in this riftlet leads us to the private first point of view. And she asks that if we deny this qualia, do we have to deny having a private first point of view entirely?
Well, this is a very good question. I want to say no. I want to say go back to what I mean by qualia. You see, if you use the word qualia just to mean the private first person point of view, or the point of view of consciousness, or phenomenal consciousness, meaning how things seem, if that's the way you use the word qualia, then I don't deny qualia in that sense. I deny qualia in the sense that Bloch defines it, that the qualia is something that goes beyond the causal, the functional, and the intentional. So I believe, so just to fill out on the question of the private first person point of view, I think each of us have a private first person point of view, and that point of view is captured by the idea of intentionality, the mind's direction on its objects. So I'm an intentionalist about consciousness, and I think consciousness is exhausted by the intentionality of our mental states. Now that's a position with a strong tradition going back to, well, at least to Husserl, I would say. But I also think in some sense it's there in Locke and Descartes. The intentionality, the presence of objects to the mind is what expresses, that's another way of filling out the idea of the private first person point of view that you describe in your question. The private first person point of view is a point of view on the objects of thought, on how that's how things seem to us. So I'm with Ty and Dennett and recent intentionalists in thinking that this is the way to, Alex Byrne as well, this is the way to understand the first person point of view is in terms of intentionality. I don't need the notion of non-intentional, ineffable qualia any more than Daniel Dennett needs that notion. So I accept some of Daniel Dennett's arguments against qualia, but I can express all the facts about consciousness, I think, with just the resources of intentionality. Does that answer the question?
I think so, yeah. Maybe we have another question here. Mason is asking, I don't understand how, from your point of view, the possibility of zombies cannot challenge physicalism. Isn't the possibility of a zombie not just its conceivability incompatible with physicalism? You may explain again.
Thank you. Yeah, let me just say it again. The possibility of zombies is incompatible with physicalism. It's the negation of physicalism, or it's at least it's implied by the negation of physicalism. Physicalism says consciousness is necessarily determined by the physical. The possibility of zombies says you can have the same physical stuff without consciousness, so therefore consciousness isn't necessarily determined by the physical. Absolutely, that's the setup. Right? That's the opposition. My question is, why isn't that just, physicalism says P and the zombie theorist says not P? That's not an argument. That's just an opposition between two different views. There's supposed to be an independent argument that we're meant to accept, which goes from the conceivability of zombies to their possibility, and then to the denial of physicalism. Actually, in the talk, I didn't say what was wrong with the idea of the conceivability of zombies, except that it's not. All right. Well, let me say what I mean. Let me say it simpler, in a simple way. What's a zombie? A zombie is a physical replica that lacks consciousness. How do we know that there could be such a thing? Well, we can conceive of them. What does it mean we can conceive of them? Well, consider other mind skepticism. In other minds skepticism, we conceive of people as if they were zombies. Isn't that then conceivable? And I say, well, in a sense, yes, in a sense, no. It's conceivable in the sense that skepticism is conceivable, but it's not conceivable if I'm a functionalist. I'm not going to say that that's conceivable because, for the reason that I said in my talk, if I'm a functionalist, I say no, I couldn't have the same mental state. I couldn't have the same physical state and the same causal states without this consciousness, because it's part of my theory that these physical states cause consciousness, and consciousness causes other physical states. So yes, the possibility of a zombie is incompatible with physicalism, but that's not an argument against physicalism. That's just the denial of physicalism. What I want to see is the argument. And when they go into details about the argument, then they have to say things like, well, it's the qualia that are missing. It's that bit of consciousness which is missing. And I say, well, now you're assuming something very controversial, and that's not something everyone should accept.
Okay, the next question, I don't know, his name is an abbreviation. He or she is asking that, how would you react to the following response? The zombie skeptical etc. hypotheses is in and of themselves should not constrain our theorizing, but their conceivability and or possibility should actually do so.
Yeah, this is what I want to reject, actually, because I think because no one thinks they're actually zombies, right? So people think what's relevant to theorizing about the mind is that zombies are possible. So yes, the view that you're expressing here is that the conceivability of zombies should actually constrain our theorizing. I want to say no, it shouldn't, any more than the conceivability of the world having existed, being created 5 minutes ago, should constrain our theorizing about space and time. So yes, what you say after but in your comment, but the conceivability and possibility should actually constrain our theorizing. That is exactly what I'm denying, because I don't think we do that in the case of other minds, in external world skepticism about the past, and we shouldn't do it for skepticism about other minds too.
Mm-hmm. Tim, we have some time actually. Yeah. Maybe it would be good because you're well known for being intentionalist, and you have lots of talks in your books. You all mentioned it. Maybe give us a very brief like introduction for intentionality and your specific view on intentionality. What we say about that?
Yeah. So yes. I understand intentionality in starting with this phrase of Brentano's as the mind's direction on its objects. So I want to say that the starting point for the idea of intentionality is the idea of an object of a state of mind. So whenever you think about something. What you think about is the object of your state of mind. Whenever you want or desire something, that want or that desire is the object of your desire, and so on. And what I mean by object here is just the things as they seem from your point of view. So an object here is not a metaphysical category, it's just the idea of the object of a state of mind. It's what you're thinking about. So if I'm thinking about my next holiday in the Seychelles, I've never been to the Seychelles, and maybe I never will. That's something that will never happen. If I think about a Lamborghini that I would like to buy, there is no Lamborghini that I'm going to buy, so I'm not actually thinking about any specific Lamborghini. So I'm sure these points are familiar to you. So I think of objects of states of mind as not as going together with the idea of a point of view, of the subject having a point of view. So for me, the concept of intentionality goes together with the concept of subjectivity. Subjectivity, intentionality, and consciousness actually form the concepts in terms of which we understand the mind. That's the way I think of intentionality. I think of intentionality as it's not just the propositional attitudes or some sort of more narrow sense of mental representation. I think of it as a way of filling out what's involved in being a subject of experience. That's basically my idea of intentionality. Now, it's hard to argue that intentionality is the mark of the mental in a direct way. I think the way I would argue is that we start with the idea of a subject of experience. And what are the most general things we can say about the states of a subject that are the mental states of the subject? So that's my approach to thinking about intentionality.
Yeah.
Oh, I see there are some more questions, I think.
Thank you. Professor Hamazadeh from he's asked that. So, what's your answer to the inverted Earth scenario by Bloch, given your intentionalist view about phenomenal consciousness?
Yeah, I think the inverted Earth argument is it's an overcomplicated scenario where it's not really clear that it's a scenario that elicits clear intuitive judgments. Actually, my short answer is that it presupposes externalism about mental content, and I think that it's true that externalism about mental content is incompatible with intentionalism, actually, about phenomenal consciousness. But I think that's something we already knew, actually. So I think if you are an intentionalist about phenomenal consciousness, you should be an internalist about intentionality. For me, that's not a problem because I think internalism is the wildly most plausible view, but I realize that not everyone thinks that. So it's a complex back and forth. It's not a simple argument, the inverted argument. I have a discussion of it in my book Elements of Mind, which has been translated into Persian as well. But I mean, of course, I'm sure that you'll read English as well. But if there's a copy of the Elements of Mind floating around on the internet somewhere, feel free to steal it and look up the argument. There's an argument in the chapter on consciousness, I think, about inverted Earth.
We have a couple of other questions. Don't you think Khosravi has asked? Don't you think deconstructing the mind by the problem, as you suggested, leads to monism, or do we have to understand the monism dualism dialectically?
I think, if I understand what you mean by dialectically, I think I would want to understand the monism dualism opposition dialectically, in the sense I would want to transcend it. Here's the simple thought, which is Descartes had a clear question, which is he had the idea of substance, and he said substance is what is capable of independent existence, and then he argues that there are two kinds of substance. There are minds, and then there's material substance. Now, so that to be a monist is to say there's one kind of substance. But I don't start with substance. I don't want to use the category of substance. Insofar as I would use the category of substance, I would use an Aristotelian category of a substance as a kind of unified individual. Is a basic reality, like an organism or something like this, or something that has a natural unity. I like the idea of natural unities, but I don't start with substance. So I don't ask the question, how many substances are there? If you don't ask the question, how many substances are there, well, then what does the contrast between monism and dualism amount to? So I think I want to say, to take your offer here, to understand it dialectically, I want to say, if we're naturalists, we look at the world and we find a plurality of things, kinds of things. We can think some things are more fundamental than others, but we're not going to have one category of the fundamental things, which are the substances. Rather, what we have is a pluralism of beings, of objects, and studied by different sciences. And that's what the natural world is. So, yeah, so I'm trying to get away from monism and dualism. If you ever read some of these papers by Chomsky, I mean, I have some sympathy with Chomsky here on this particular matter. Chomsky has a paper, I think, called Mind and Nature, where he discusses this. So he thinks once you abandon the idea of substance as Descartes formulated it, then you have to abandon the idea of the mind, the traditional mind-body problem.
Yeah, thank you. Next question, Jawad has asked that, can somebody claim that this kind of conceivability that we are talking about is some kind of pre-theoretic intuition which we have, and it cannot be dismissed by only embracing a theory, refuting it? It should be at least explained away.
I think in a sense I agree with that the pre-theoretic intuition is, that's the sense in, we have this kind of pre-theoretic sense that the skeptical hypotheses are conceivable. In fact, we even have the sense that they're possible. The world could have been like this. You know, Bertrand Russell says the world could have been created 5 minutes ago. That is a sort of pre-theoretic intuition. That's right. Now, the question is, what epistemic value should we give to that pre-theoretic intuition in theorizing about reality? And I'm saying not much. Now you say it should at least be explained away. I don't know how to explain it away. It would be nice to be able to explain it away. It would be nice to be able to say skepticism is incoherent. And some transcendental argument theorists like, you know, Wittgenstein and P.F. Strawson and perhaps Kant, I don't know, tried to argue that it was incoherent. I'd like to be able to argue that it's incoherent, but I've never seen a good argument for that. So what I would rather say is, let's not give ourselves the burden of arguing that skepticism is incoherent. Let's distinguish theorizing about skepticism and theorizing about the mind. That's my line. And then Transhuman says, hi guys.